Pleasure speaking to him. I don't know how many books have you done so far?
How many books? Well,
Yeah.
I just partially, I was one of the contributors to 97 Things That Every UX Practitioner Should Know. That was published by O'Reilly the middle of last year, I believe it was.
Okay.
We've got another 3 or 4 that we're working on, but some other things are taking priority currently.
That's fantastic. So, everyone, I want to introduce you to Darren Hood. I'm not going to take anything away from his introduction, but there's a thing you should do. You should definitely try and find Darren Hood's podcast that he does. Are you still doing it on a weekly basis or?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. It's a must for any UX practitioner. I think there's so many nuggets that you can take away from that. But I'm not going to, without any further ado, Darren, take it away, mate.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Well, it's good evening for you folks there. It's morning for me. I just got up not that long ago. So I'm here talking to you today from Southfield, Michigan in the USA. So welcome. I know you've had a fantastic event so far. And so my goal, as always is the case, is to bring you something of value that's going to help vault you forward in your journey when it comes to user experience. Today, I'm going to talk to you about what I call the UX cycle of excellence. And there's a lot of really jumping off slides. Won't be a lot for you to read, but a lot for you to hear. These references for this talk are actually online today. And I'll make the presentation available so people can get it through Theo as well. But I talk about this a lot in different circles, mainly because there's some things that we need to do. A lot of people want to get into UX, but just as is the case with a lot of other, how can I call it, professional career tracks, you can't just jump in. There are some things that need to be done in order to make it optimal. So that's what we want to talk to you about. I'll break this down as we go. So a little bit about me from a introductory perspective. For those of you who are not familiar with me and who don't know me, I am a 27-year practitioner. People like to jokingly refer to me as an OG in UX. I was working on UX before we called it UX, dating all the way back to 1995, which is when I first got my feet wet, so to speak, doing things, not knowing that it was things that we were going to be doing later in UX, but I was doing those things and I didn't used to give myself credit for it, but today I do. So 27 years of experience, going back, doing research, working on information architecture, trying to measure cognitive load and things like that. I was doing those things back in 1995. So been around for a bit, been in love with the discipline practically from the beginning. A little bit more about me, because I like to share some personal things too. I have 2 UX-related master's degrees, one from Syracuse University in the U.S. and one from Kent State University, where I also happen to teach. I teach at Kent State University. I've been teaching at Harrisburg University. I'm about to start teaching at Brandeis University. I'm about to start teaching at UCLA. I'm on tap to start teaching in a program I helped develop for customer experience at Michigan State University. So I get around a bit, amongst other things, speaking engagements, the book that we mentioned. I'm in the book, 97 Things Every UX Practitioner Should Know. And then there's my podcast. So I mentor people all over the world, and those are organic mentorships, which I'm not going to speak to a lot today, but I thought I'd mention that. There's nothing formal about those things, but mentoring is not what people are saying, but I'm going to try not to go that route today. There's my picture of my beautiful wife, Angela, there in the middle. We have 4 cats. I love cats. That's our one of our cats, Rocky, and his picture appeared in the local Humane Society calendar. And that was the picture that ended up there. I love photography. That's a picture of one of my favorite cameras there. I love bicycling. I actually lost 100 pounds and bicycling was a key part of that. So I got to give a shout out to my bicycle there. I just wish I still have that particular bike. That's a Tour de France bike. I don't have it anymore. That's bothering me. But I also like bowling. Any of you are bowlers out there? You ever want to talk about bowling? Let's talk bowling. I actually am a former Professional Bowlers Association PBA member. That's a picture of my first 300 game that was sanctioned there, and the name of our team was I Like Tacos. That's an old joke. And the World Usability Day logo was there because I speak all over the world for different events, such as this one. I speak locally, I internationally, and just wherever I can help. I just love helping. I'm not in it to make a name for myself. I'm not in it to make money. I'm not making any money off of it. I'm in it. I do what I do for the discipline because I care about the discipline, and I care about people who love the discipline and have fallen in love with the discipline and want to make a go at it. I like helping people to vault themselves forward. So that's why I do what I do when it comes to user experience. A little bit of info about my professional footprint. As you can see, I have been everywhere. So, I don't even, this is not all inclusive. These are just some of the ones that a lot of people are going to be able to relate to. For the folks in Berlin, you will notice the Bosch logo. Yes, I did used to be a UX manager at Bosch. I used to manage the automotive aftermarket UX operation for Bosch in the United States. I also served EMEA, and I served Asia Pacific, and I was really proud of what we were able to do there. They said it was the best run division of UX division in the company at the time I was there, so still proud of that to this day. Didn't get to come to Berlin, but I love Stuttgart. I love coming to Germany. Just one of these days, I got to come back. I absolutely love it. Matter of fact, my trips to Germany is what got me back into photography, because I just saw too many beautiful things and ended up getting back into it. But this is a snapshot of where I've been, things I've done, companies I've served, companies I have worked for. So again, I won't talk about this. You probably see some logos that you recognize. And the one that I will call out here, take a moment to call out, is the Arity logo, far right, second row. That's where I'm serving now as an experience design manager, where we're working with predictive analytics, predictive mobility, and trying to drive optimal user experiences. Don't believe the hype. Everything you hear about sharing data is not bad. Every company you hear that's doing things with data are not doing things unethically. And we are one of those good companies. Just want to point that out. Take the time to point that out. Oh, if my presentation will cooperate. There we go. So let's get into the topic. So as mentioned, I mean, if you're at this talk today, you're either in UX or you're thinking about it. When it comes to getting into UX, getting into it and getting a job is one thing. The question comes up, even for people who've been in UX for 2-3 years, as many as 7 or 8 years, I've heard people bring up the topic that I'm going to be talking to you about today. It's like, once you're in it, where do I go from here? What do I do? How do I grow? What can I do to help manage my career? I mean, I've got the job, I'm doing the work, but what's next? And again, there are people I've seen who've been in it for a decade and are still asking this question, because a lot of people don't really talk about it. Again, I work in academia. I educate people, and even people who have a master's degree find themselves asking the same question, because it's sort of an enigma. People just don't know what to do or where to go. I want to give you some answers about this today, and I want to talk to you briefly about what I call the UX cycle of excellence. And what it is basically is a 7-step approach that you can use to help manage your own, what I call, personal UX maturity. You have organizational UX maturity. We know about that. Most of us do. A lot of us do. And if you don't, well, you just heard about it. So now you've heard about it. But UX maturity has to do with the company, how the company is operating, how the organization is operating, how well UX is received in the company, how much UX is involved, how early UX is involved, how much buy-in and support do you have from leadership, how are the projects in that company run, is UX even involved to the point where we can make the appropriate impact. Those things speak to UX maturity. That's not all inclusive, but those are a lot of aspects associated with corporate UX maturity. But then you have something you never hear anybody talk about, which is why I've started talking about it, and I'm going to be doing a workshop on it in the not too distant future. You have what we call personal UX maturity, because the organization has UX maturity, but no matter where the organization's UX maturity is, there's you, there's me, there's your cohorts, there's your team members, and every individual has a different level of personal UX maturity. Just as organizational UX maturity needs to be, there needs to be a sense of awareness. There needs to be someone who is deliberately managing the UX maturity. And if nobody is doing it, then it's just driving itself. And that's not a good thing. So with personal UX maturity, it's the same thing. In order to manage our direction, in order to have our hands on the steering wheel of the trajectory of our own personal growth, maturity, and the direction that we're headed, we have to be deliberate. We need to know. So I've put together these guidelines to help us get there. And many of you, you're going to recognize some things here that you're going to see these things. You go, wow, I need to double back. That's okay. I think when we're trying to grow ourselves and manage ourselves, just as we are with our work, we need to be iterative. So, but we'll get to that. Step 1, properly define the discipline. Step number 2, and we'll speak to each one of these individually today, but I want to give you the overview. Step 2, you need to embrace UX's foundational tenets. Step number 3, evaluate your current state. Where are you today? What do you have a solid grasp on? Where are your opportunities for growth? Which leads us into step 4. When you evaluate your current state, eventually you identify knowledge and skill gaps. Where can I grow? You know what? I know about this, but I don't know as much as I think I need to know. That is critical because it's at that step 4 that you can start to plot out your own strategy where you can really start to grow. But again, we'll get to these in more detail in a bit. Step 5, you need to commit to building towards excellence. It's one thing to be a part of UX, but another thing to be excellent at it. Step 6, you have to commit to personal maintenance. Where you, and again, we'll get, I keep wanting to jump into it, but we'll get to each one of these individually. And then step 7 is just be patient with yourself. Be patient. And a lot of people are not. But again, we'll speak to these at length as we go forward. Let's dive into step number 1. Let us properly define the discipline. I'm sure a lot of you have, if you haven't, this hasn't happened to you, it will. When you ever had somebody ask you what UX is and you struggle to define it? Have you ever had somebody tell you what UX is and you find yourself scratching your head and you wonder what in the world is UX? Have you noticed that there are a ton of different attempts? I'm going to call them attempts for now, for the purpose of this talk. It seems like there's 200-300 people trying to, or different definitions that are out there where people are trying to define the discipline. Well, number 1, it's possible for us to have a lot of definitions and they're all still serviceable. It's important for us to know and understand that. There's some bad ones out there. There are some that will lead you down the wrong road. Yes. And we'll talk about some of those for a moment. But know and understand that when you're in UX, and if you have to double back and do this, double back and do it, because a lot of people that are doing UX today are still not properly defining it. If you want to get on the road to excellence, you gotta start here. If UX is not properly defined, again, you'll go down the wrong street. And not only then will it throw you off track, but each one of us is a steward of this discipline. Each one of us impacts the discipline of UX. No matter who you are or what you do, you are impacting someone else's perception of the discipline, and thereby you're impacting the trajectory of the discipline, and you're impacting the UX maturity level at your organizations, within your groups, within your teams, things of that nature. So we must properly define the discipline. And here are a few things that we want to touch on before we get to a definition that you can work with if you don't have one. UX's main concern is not aesthetics. I mean, we can't talk about what UX is without talking about what it's not, because there's so much misinformation out there. So we're not the people to come in and make it pretty. That's not who we are, even though a lot of people think we are. That's not who we are. UX is not UI. And if you're familiar with me, you know how loud I am about this. There is no such thing as UI/UX. There is no such thing as UX, UI. Absolutely no such thing. So we need to know and understand that on today. UX is not just one thing. And you'll find out shortly what I mean by that. UX is not a mindset. a lot of people actually refer to UX as being a mindset, and it's more than a mindset, way more than a mindset. Here's one that's really, really, really critical. UX is not design thinking, and design thinking has been taking over UX a lot. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. If you want more on that, I did a talk called "Design Processes Are Overrated." You'll check that out. You'll get my download on UX or on design thinking as it relates to UX. But that's important there. UX is not UX if it does not include actual insights from users. UX is what it is because of the users and the data that we get from them. And it's about the users, the user needs, the business needs, and we're limited based on the constraints. So we find the sweet spot between the three. So these are things that if you're going to flourish in UX, we need to know these things today. Want a definition? UX refers to the set of methods and techniques, as mentioned, used to find the sweet spot between user goals, business goals, and various types of constraints. So I got ahead of myself a little bit mentioning that, but you got to find the sweet spot between the three. And there's a whole host of methods. So this is what it takes to properly define the discipline. And I'll give you a broader look at the discipline from a very, I'll say a detailed perspective in just a moment. Step number 2, make sure you embrace UX's foundational tenets. And now people would say, well, what are UX's foundational tenets? Well, there are certain aspects, as just mentioned. UX is about using various methodologies to drive toward a sweet spot. When you look at the foundational tenets, they happen to be heuristics and usability, information architecture, research, UX research, and interface and interaction design. That's where UI lives. So these are the foundational tenets of the discipline. If you're going to thrive, and you might be a specialist, and by the way, there were no specializations in UX prior to 2011, 2012. We were all UX architects, UX designers, information architects, things of that nature. And we would do more than what our title always said that we did. It wasn't until later that the specializations came about. What's happening with the specializations, though, is that people are focusing on a specialization, but they don't have a broader understanding of the discipline. And as a result of that, because the UX generalist has become sort of like this thing that's in the weeds somewhere where you don't find a lot of people that are operating as a UX generalist. These things are critical to understand that when you specialize, if you want to be a better specialist, you need to have a broader understanding of the discipline. So again, when you embrace the foundational tenets, no matter what it is your job might be, when you embrace the foundational tenets, that's going to put you on the track to excellence. For example, if you are a UX researcher, your ability to optimize when it comes to UX researcher, if you don't understand information architecture, if you don't understand heuristics and usability, if you don't understand interaction design principles, that's going to limit you when it comes to your ability to thrive as a researcher. I can't tell you how many people I've encountered in my career who want to focus on research but don't understand heuristics, and then they end up testing things that are already heuristically proven. And just because heuristics exist, proven principles, best practices, common conventions, just because those things exist doesn't mean that you don't have to research them. But the way you research them is different when you understand that what you're trying to test is actually a heuristic. And building UX maturity levels is highly dependent upon how well the organization and the team is grounded in heuristics. So you can impact what you're doing from a research perspective the more you know about the other tenets within the discipline. You don't just, it is called UX research, for God's sake. It's UX research. So you come in and you understand UX, but you focus on research. And when you do it that way, you're going to be better off. A lot of people are coming in today. They're going straight to UX research because they think they can, and they don't realize that they're actually at a gross disadvantage. If you want to be better at whatever your specialization is, understand UX from a broad perspective, and you'll be better off for it. Your teams will be better off for it. Your users will be better off for it. Your organization, your team will be better off for it. Number 3, now that we properly define what UX is, when you have made it a point to commit to understanding the foundational tenets of UX, now it's time to look at you. It's time to look at self. And I didn't spend a lot of time on that illustration, but that illustration, which I usually show to people just to give them an understanding of how big UX really is. If you notice, and again, you'll get a copy of this, when you have the 4 pillars, it's what I call them, then there were a lot of other methods and methodologies sprinkled throughout the illustration. And this is what I do in the workshop. I have people pick elements on that illustration to evaluate themselves on. And not only do they evaluate themselves on it, but because it's real easy to say on the scale of 1 to 10, from a Likert perspective, I give myself an 8 on that. And people will randomly do something like that when it comes to self-evaluation. That's not how I recommend you do it. To try to eliminate bias and to try to drive as much objectivity in the evaluation process as possible, I highly recommend that you break it down into segments. You want to evaluate yourself from how familiar are you with it? How good are you at practicing it? How much have you practiced it? These types of things. So when you break down your evaluation into more rudimentary or from a more granular perspective, and you only give yourself X number of points for that, I'm not going to break the whole thing down here, but I think you understand what I'm getting at. You have to break down that evaluation into segments and then look at it from that perspective, and you limit yourself. Well, I'm familiar with it. Well, how familiar are you with the concept of semiotics, for example? If you've never heard that before, if you never worked with semiotics, if you never found yourself diving into semiotics, then, and I'm purposely not defining it here, then that would be a 0. You can only give yourself up to 2.5 points for any one of the different areas, because I divide the evaluation into 4 segments. That way, you can't just say, I'm going to give myself a 9, and you just do it flippantly and you do it whimsically. That's not good. It is critical that you evaluate yourself accurately. It's critical that you evaluate yourself as objectively as possible, because remember, we're talking about managing your personal UX maturity. So if we're doing that, that means that you need to be as accurate as possible, because if you're inaccurate, when you go to try to manage yourself or you try to prescribe methods to grow in the area of semiotics, for example, if your assessment is inaccurate, you're not going to be able to properly strategize on how to grow yourself in that given area. So you never heard of semiotics? On the scale of 0 to 2.5, you got to give yourself a 0. If you've heard it, but you never really applied yourself to it or never done any work concerning that, you might give yourself maybe a 0.5 or maybe a 1 because you've heard of it. But just because you've never really applied yourself to it, then you've got to limit yourself, and then that's going to pan out in your best interest. So again, just a little highlight. We're not getting into that in detail today, but trying to give you an idea as to what you have to do in order to evaluate yourself. And there's so many topics in UX that is practically limitless, especially when you look at the time that goes into it. So you want to be real careful about how you evaluate yourself. You want to be as honest as you possibly can, and that's key to achieving goals. As you evaluate yourself, you're going to be able to see knowledge and skill gaps, looking at the semiotics example that I just mentioned. Okay, I've never heard of it. I've never really applied it. I had to look up a definition of it. Yes, that's fine. You can look up a definition of it to see and to help with the self-eval. When you do that, you want to make it a point that you say, okay, I know it or I don't know it. This is something I want to know or I need to know more about. And I also recommend at this point, how would I use this in my current job? What could I do? How could this apply when it comes to helping me in my current UX practice? You want to make sure that you tie this thing that you're learning to your current state. The presentation that just took place, and the person was talking about the metaverse. How much do you know about the metaverse? Are you well versed in it? Do you just know what it is, but you never really done anything with it? Maybe this is an area for personal growth. Is it something that is going to be applicable to your current job? These are the types of things that are critical for us to know and understand. And we want to factor these things in when it comes to identifying our knowledge and skill gaps. And it's going to help to drive our success. And we do this for every single solitary topic. If this sounds like a lot of work, it is. UX is a lot of work. A lot of people are coming into UX today because they've been told that it's easy. Folks, there is pure UX, what I call pure UX, and there is the cult of UX. Pure UX takes work. Pure UX brings value. Pure UX requires skill and acumen building on the behalf of those who are doing the work. The cult of UX requires none of those things. It is easy because you're not doing anything. But if you want to grow when it comes to pure UX, it is going to take some work. It is going to take some attention. It is going to take deliberation, but it pays off. So let's be committed to doing that today. Once you've done all these things, the next thing is you've got to start building toward excellence. And I've already sort of addressed this a bit. The strategy that you need to embrace. How are you going to make things better? This is going to involve something that we call a personalized learning network, or PLN. What podcast can I tap into? What are the good sources of information? And folks, I said this a little bit, I alluded to it. There was no misinformation in UX prior to 2011. Today, it's everywhere. So when you're trying to build toward excellence, you're not going to be able to be any better than the quality and the reliability of the resources that you tap into. So whether it's books, I personally have a ton of book recommendation lists out on Medium. I have educational resources that I post out to Medium. Medium itself is a cesspool in general, but if there's some gold out there. It's like the gold rush. You run out for the gold rush. Some people find gold, some people find pyrite or fool's gold. And the sad thing is that fool's gold actually contains some gold in it, but it looks like gold and it's not. There is a gold rush of information in the world of UX today. And the more you build, the more you drive towards excellence, the more you build a filter, and the more you build a filter, you'll be more selective about what you partake of, and it'll help guard you against what's going on with regard to misinformation today. But make sure that you are ready to build towards excellence, put together a sound strategy so that you can truly get better at what you do, and then you become an asset to yourself, your team, the organization, your users, the discipline at large. All of these things are dependent upon what we do at this step. After that, this is when iteration comes in. We have to personally and deliberately commit to personal maintenance. You don't just grow and arrive. People are spreading this mindset that you can learn everything you need to know about UX in 6 months. Or, I mean, you're not going to learn. We will never, I have never, nobody is going to learn everything there is to know about UX. Let me borrow from the previous speaker again. How much did you know about the metaverse before that person got up to speak? How much do we know about the metaverse as it pertains to UX today? What we know about UX and the metaverse today is nothing compared to what we're going to know in 3, 4, 5 years. And everything that we're doing in UX is continuously expanding and growing. The form factors are changing. How we apply heuristics, how we apply Bruce Tognazini's interaction design principles changes because we're interacting with different things. We're interacting at different speeds. We're interacting through different mechanisms, through different modes, through different form factors. So because of these things will always change. And we always, even the areas that we're sound in, we can always be better. So We have to commit to personal maintenance. And as I always say, when you get involved in UX, there is a commitment, I should say, to lifelong learning. So when you're always ready to learn, it's always going to have you on this track where you're engaged in personal maintenance. And personally, something that I do that I'll mention here, I like going and being exposed even to topics that I feel that I really, really know. And I will go in and like forget what you know in the moment, attend this talk like you don't know anything about it. And you'd be surprised how much you learn, even when you really know the topic, when you go in just deciding, okay, I don't know anything. Let me sit, let me listen, let me be quiet, let me take this in. And you take the information in, and you'll find that you'll pick up 2 or 3 things that sharpen your saw a little bit. That's what we want to be able to do. But remember, sort of doubling back to point 5, I said this on social media recently, don't be a sponge. And somebody will say, well, isn't a sponge good? In general, being a sponge means that we soak everything up. The problem with a sponge is it soaks up everything. Sponges are not discriminatory in what they choose to absorb. We need to be a selective sponge. We need to have a filter. We don't want to just absorb something because it's liquid. We want to absorb it because we're supposed to be absorbing it. Sponges absorb water. It shouldn't be absorbing poison. It shouldn't, but if it's liquid form, it's going to absorb it. It shouldn't be absorbing antifreeze. It shouldn't be absorbing, unless you're trying to get antifreeze up, but why would you get antifreeze up with a sponge? So I think you get the metaphor. We want to be careful of what we absorb. So again, the more you drive toward excellence, the stronger your filter will get, the more selective you get, and the safer you will be, and the safer the people that listen to you will be. Number 7, and it might seem like this is, why are we even talking about this? People are not, they're not patient with themselves. And when you're not patient with yourself and you want things to happen too fast, you're setting yourself up for failure. Please, please, please be patient with yourself. Don't expect too much out of yourself too soon. Don't demand too much out of yourself. Don't be unrealistic in your personal expectations, and give yourself a chance to grow. If you hear a presentation and you don't get it, or you go to a class and you're might be struggling with grasping the concept, walk away from it, take a step back, go for a walk, come back. You'd be surprised that just that being patient will cause yourself to sort of settle from a cognitive perspective, and you'll put yourself in a better position to absorb or digest and apply what it is that you're learning. But a lot of people today have that microwavable mindset where they're trying to absorb things or do things or get somewhere too fast. And sometimes you think you got it too fast and you really didn't. And if you think you're somewhere that you're not, I mean, if you're on a road trip from Utah to New York and you think you're in New York, but you're actually in Kansas, you're simply not there yet. So we want to be realistic about things, and we want to be very patient, very deliberate. And you'll find that when you take your time, when you opt into the slower, more deliberate path, you'll find that your experiences are more long lasting. The impact of those experiences are more long lasting, as opposed to trying to microwave everything, rising up through the ranks too fast. These things, if you're rising up too fast, you're doing things too fast, you're missing something, and something is terribly wrong, and it's going to bite you when you least expect it, and it's not going to be kind when it does. So please be deliberate and be patient with yourself. It's worth its weight in gold. So folks, that is the UX cycle of excellence. I hope you got some takeaways here. Step 1, properly define the discipline. Step 2, embrace UX's foundational tenets. Step 3, evaluate your current state in UX. Know who you are. Identify your knowledge and skill gap. Step 4, know what you know what you don't know. One of the best things you can ever do is know what you don't know. And a lot of people don't know what they don't know, so they're vulnerable. We don't want to be those people. If you're there today, you can always transition out of it. No problem. Step 5, make sure you build towards excellence. Always make it a point to strive to excel at what you do. Don't be satisfied with being a number in this age of participation trophies. Don't be satisfied with just being counted as being a part of something. make sure to be somebody that's helping to drive something, and you'll get more satisfaction out of what you do, and everybody else will benefit. Step 5, make sure that you build towards excellence. Did I just say that again? I don't know. I'll repeat it again if I did. Build towards excellence. So step 6, commit to personal maintenance. You want to make it a point that you are always taking a look at what you can do better. Make it a point that you're being iterative about your own personal development. I'd even challenge you to look at things that you think you know and check them. I mean, you have a car, you take it in. If you have an automobile, you take it in to get a checkup, and they may find something wrong. They may not. We have to take this same type of approach with ourselves. So if we commit to personal maintenance, we're making sure that we're always looking at where we are, how well we're doing, what we can grow in, or what we're doing well in and we're thriving in, then maybe you become a thought leader in that area. Great. Then go and help build somebody else. That's how we get there. Instead of going from skipping all these steps. And some people today, they become, because being a thought leader is embedded in step 6, really. Some people jump straight there and they only have 2 or 3 months of experience. Not only are they not doing us a favor, they're not doing themselves a favor, they're not doing the discipline a favor. No, let's go through these steps. And then step 7, again, be patient with yourself, because it does take time to achieve mastery. It does take time to become someone who's capable of being a thought leader. It takes time to arrive at being a senior in the discipline. And yes, it does take a while. You're not a senior if you've only been doing it for 2 years. Not a thing. That's what they told you, and that's the title they gave you. But that's truthfully, you're not there yet, and you're not going to achieve excellence, especially if you think you're somewhere that you're not yet. It's not going to help. So be patient with yourself. Be patient as you grow, and you and everyone else will be the better for it. So that's it, everybody. Thank you for your time on today. Again, I hope you heard something that's going to help you to vault you forward. Thank you. If you want to know where you can find me, you got the podcast, The World of UX. I'm on Twitter under UX Uncensored and Darren Hood. Most people connect with me through LinkedIn. I'm coming up on 18,000 followers up there today on LinkedIn. I am on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, the UX Uncensored YouTube channel. So you can go there and find some talks about different topics there. I have a blog on Medium at uxuncensored.medium.com. And I'm also on Instagram. I recently invaded Instagram because it was a place where a lot of weird things were happening. I even am launching a channel on TikTok because, again, people are going to all these sources to find information. So I want to be able to provide solutions on all of them. So you'll be able to find me pretty much across the board. So, folks, that
fantastic. Thank you so much, Darren. I really appreciate it. You are now officially a TikToker.
Yes, I am. Even though I'm let me stop sharing here. I'm a TikToker, but I still need to. There's some things I still need to produce here today. We put an intro out there. We'll get some other content out there soon. I want to start doing things like come up with a cadence, maybe bi-weekly. But I want to start getting information out there on a regular basis because misinformation, folks, it's rampant.
It's real.
Misinformation is rampant. And I love the fact that a lot of people want to get into UX, but when you run smack dab into misinformation, it's going to set you back. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced when you've been doing something or approaching something the wrong way, unlearning it is harder than having learned it correctly in the first place. So we're trying to put resources, me and there's other people doing it as well, trying to put good, sound information out there. So it just continuously vaults you forward. And when that happens, and again, we're all better off for it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. So one of Ekaterina, she's from Stockholm, reckons, where do you have time with all these platforms?
Time management.
So yeah, you're right. There's a lot of sort of snake oil salesmen out there. So how would you any sort of advice on determining the good from the bad?
There's going to be a lot of trial and error depending upon where you are in your personal UX maturity. It's going to depend on that because when you first start out, you don't have a filter. I mean, think back on when we were kids. We pretty much when we were kids, also if something looked like something, we were all over it. We were in. We had no scrutiny. We didn't discriminate. We just tapped in. If it was fun, we were all over it. If you had left it up to us as kids, we would have lived off of ice cream, cake, and other stuff like that. We're the same. I know we don't like to think about it that way. And I know sometimes we think little of ourselves when we look at that, but that's an EQ thing. It's when one of the steps for a cycle of excellence is that you really got to know who you are. And when you know who you are, you're going to come across some things you're not going to be happy that you see. But I'd rather know that I have a nail in my tire, in my Maserati, or whatever kind of car it is. I'd rather know there's a nail in my tire and get it taken care of than to ignore it and get on the freeway and end up with a blowout. Because metaphorically speaking, the same thing can happen. So you're not gonna have the filter up front. You develop it over time, and you'll end up going, wow, I used to listen to that. I can't do that anymore. There are a lot of approved, like, how can I say, stereotypically approved UX resources that shouldn't be. I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to say what they are. I know what they are. I evaluate on a regular basis. And let me give you a quick example without identifying anybody, because I just don't want to do that today. I normally do, but I won't today. The concept of gatekeeping, I would venture to say that a lot of you have heard that gatekeeping is bad. What would you say if I told you that if we don't start embracing gatekeeping, the discipline of UX is going to go under? And when I say go under, I used to be an instructional designer. And when I was an instructional designer, instructional design had been around for some years. I wasn't a leader in the discipline, but I did rise up in certain areas sort of kind of quickly because of my specialization, because I was an e-learning specialist. I was a web-based training specialist. I used to sit on the advisory board for Captivate, which is now an Adobe product. Came over when Adobe and Macromedia merged, and so I was a known expert. I was an expert in something called authorware. Some of you may be familiar with authorware. I was an expert in it, and so I really, because I was so good at that, and there were so few people that were in instructional design, but they weren't embracing technology. Because I was embracing technology, I was surpassing a lot of these people. Well, when I was doing that, all of a sudden, I started noticing things about the discipline. Organizations didn't understand training. They didn't understand that there was a science behind instructional design. So they didn't have an appreciation for the people who were skilled at instructional design. They were always trying to cut corners. So they started hiring people. I'm sure some of you have gone to a presentation before, a training session specifically, and all they did was read off of slides. That's because the people doing the training weren't trainers. They were just filling a spot. These types of things started happening so regularly that I noticed that I'm not staying in this discipline, because if I do, it's going under. It's being overrun by all these people that are really posers and posers and upstarts and retrofits. For those of you familiar with me, those terms sound familiar because I use them today when I'm talking about UX. Fast forward, the same thing started happening in UX, where organizations don't understand UX, people trying to get into UX without really being qualified. People will lie about their qualifications to get a UX job. They will say they've got 10 years experience when they have none. But because the organization doesn't know how to evaluate UX talent, those people are embraced. So all those things said, now we're being overrun. Fast forward to 2022. I started saying in 2011 that UX was under siege, and people were ignoring me, telling me to shut up, telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. Today, the people, those posers, retrofits, and upstarts have pretty much overrun. So now you got people that are tell you that things about UX that are not true. And back to my point, people will get up there and tell you that gatekeeping is bad, and that if people are trying to tell you what you need to do to be good at UX, they're being a gatekeeper and they're trying to keep you from getting a job. Folks, there's nobody trying to keep anybody anywhere from getting a job as a new UXer. It is 100% non-existent. It simply isn't existent. The fact that entry-level jobs are minuscule is standard for any discipline. So it's not that people, they feel the way they feel because they want that UX job so bad, and then they can't get it. And then because they can't get it because they want it, and that's being fueled by bias also, they think that people are getting in the way and blocking them. No, that's just the way it is. It was that way when I came in. Nobody was gatekeeping anything. It was just, you don't readily find entry-level positions. This is still a discipline that's roughly 20 years old. People need somebody to come in that can bring value faster. When you come in as an entry-level person, you're not bringing a lot of value. They're investing in you and hoping you stay. And when these entry-level people come in and then they leave, they're actually creating this thing that people don't want to hire entry-level people because they have a history of not staying. So entry-level people are creating this thing, the same mindset that they're complaining about. But nobody is blocking anyone. If anything, seniors are being blocked because nobody wants to work with people like me because they feel like they're being gatekept, when in fact, gatekeeping is not blocking anybody. Gatekeeping is actually quality advocacy. The legal field is where it is today because they embrace gatekeeping. The accounting field is today where it is because it embraced gatekeeping. My goodness, the hairdressing arena is where it is today because people embrace gatekeeping. So they embrace quality and standards and people standing up for what it is we should be doing in order to be accepted, in order to bring a value to the organizations and the people that we serve. That's what gatekeeping is. Long live gatekeeping. But if you believe these posers, retrofits, and upstarts that have positioned themselves as thought leaders, you'll believe that. If we don't start embracing gatekeeping, we will end up being in the same exact position, which is why I told that long story about instructional design, because gatekeeping was eventually stepped on and it was shoved aside, and then the people who didn't know ended up taking the discipline over. We're on the verge of that happening today, just so you know. So we got to embrace gatekeeping. We need to have standards. I'm actually working for an organization now that's helping to come up with licensing for the discipline. There's a news flash for some of you. It's going to start in the States, and we're looking at expanding into Europe and around the world beyond, because we need licensure to help establish standards for this discipline. Because if we don't, the people who have been doing UX for 5 years and have videos everywhere trying to tell people how to do research are going to start dictating the flow of the discipline, but they don't know anything about the history of the discipline. You can't get into any discipline without knowing, respecting, and embracing its history. People today, they don't know the history. So they're doing any and everything. As long as it vaults them forward and puts money in their pocket, they'll do it. Somebody had an event recently. They said, embrace gatekeeping and you'll become a better, or I'm sorry, got it wrong. They said, embrace imposter syndrome and you will become a better leader. That, and then when you go through the whole thing, you find out the person is teaching a series and it costs you $5,000 to sign up for their sessions. Here's what's bad about it and why you should recognize that was bad in the beginning. Number one, imposter syndrome. I know some of you believe imposter syndrome is a thing. It actually isn't. It was created by two women who were being disrespected. They were victims of sexism by their male peers who would not embrace what they were bringing to the table. These women were decorated. They were educated. They had credentials. These men would not embrace them because they were just being jerks. Frankly, they were just being jerks about it. These women went back, instead of standing up for who they were and being the experts that they were, they created this concept because they began to feel like imposters because these people were not recognizing them. Do you have a doctor? Are you a PhD? How long did you go to school for that? How much student loan debt do you have? Are you kidding me? How much work have you done? How much have you accomplished? When people try to gaslight you, which is really what that was all about, You need to stand up to the gaslighting. Don't create a fake entity to cope with someone gaslighting you. That's what happened. So now, unbeknownst to them, around the world, people hear a presentation on imposter syndrome, immediately assume, oh yeah, I've got imposter syndrome. Did you know that by imposter syndrome standards, you have to actually be skilled at what you do and have been practicing for X amount of time in order to qualify? People believe in this. And so when you embrace imposter syndrome, you're already going down the wrong track because you're embracing something that doesn't exist. You don't have imposter syndrome. Please hear me out. You're going through self-doubt. We all go through that. That's life. That's called life. It's not called imposter syndrome. It's called life. So if you have self-doubt, you'll eventually overcome that. The more you practice, you get around the right people, they support you, they build you up, you'll be fine. But here's what I hate about imposter syndrome. Not only does it not exist, but when you try to tell some people that they don't have it, they get violent. They'd rather hold on to their imposter syndrome than overcome it. Doesn't that sound bad? So back to the story. This guy is capitalizing on the fact that people are accepting imposter syndrome, and he's making $5,000 a person off of it. Probably 50 people signed up. 50 times 5? What, 200? What, I don't remember. Siri, what is 25 times 5? I'm not doing any math.
It's 125.
125,000. If 25 people signed up. And really, he should have empty pockets with lint in them. He should be taking the lint out of his pockets. Not 125,000 based off of, and this person has less than 7 years in the discipline and disrespects the discipline on every hand, getting rich off of unsuspecting people. I'm giving out free information regularly. You don't have to spend $8,000 to $25,000 on a boot camp. We're giving you this. Debbie Levitt has information out there that's free. She's just rolling the information out. You don't have to pay for this information. And but Darren, I want to go through a formal learning process. Good. Then go to Cornell University or something like a university, an accredited institution where there's actually accountability. Don't go through the Google program. There's no accountability in it. And Google's not an educator. And the fact that they're successful as a corporation doesn't make them educators. Education is an institution. You can't function in it unless you are part of that institution. That's what I'm getting my PhD in. And from an educational leadership perspective, that's totally unethical. But now they got 400,000, I think is the last number. Theo, 400,000 graduates. And nobody should have gone through the program in the first place. And 400,000 graduates, so that's 400,000 entry-level people entering a discipline where we're overrun, we're oversaturated with entry-level candidates. So did that really help us? No. So at any rate, the filter, the more you learn, the filter, back to your original question, the filter gets developed. You'll begin, I hope some of the things I called out here give you some of those things that you could look out for. Look up somebody's, when somebody presents something or they're talking about something, go to LinkedIn, look up their profile. If the things they're saying extend beyond the experience that they're professing, go the other way. Go the other way. If they're trying to be a thought leader and they've only been, I've literally seen a person say that they're a mentor and they've only been doing UX for 3 months. You're not a mentor.
Yeah.
You're not in anything. If you're in UX, great. You want to grow in UX? Fine. More power to you. I'd love to help you any way I can. But don't lie about it. Let's not misrepresent. And so these snake oil salesmen, they've been here throughout the history of man. And anytime there's gullible people, snake oil salesmen thrive.
So true.
So that's what we're trying to do. And I'll stop there.
Darren, I just wanted to leave it there. We've overshot on time. I see we do have sort of 2 questions, but I think we've covered most of them. I think the one that Patricia had was, what is your thoughts on NNG certification?
Oh, it's sad. I have 2 of them and they've never benefited me. I think that the NNG certification is, people do it because you get I did it because I got personal satisfaction out of it. I think a lot of people do it because of the personal satisfaction they get, the sense of accomplishment, things like that. I've seen a lot of people come out of it who have the certifications that bring nothing to the table because they just wanted to get the certification, but they weren't really committed to what they were going to learn in the certification. That's not cool. So the person is certified, but they brought nothing to their team. So, but I would say the NNG certification is not what it is represented to be, sadly. That's my opinion on that as an educator and as a professional. That it's a cash cow for them to an extent, because if you're already skilled, you can't test out. You have to take their courses. So that means that you have to take at least 1 week of courses, and you have to take the right courses. If you don't take the right courses, they all have to be related to that certification. If you take one course that's wrong, now you got to go back. Now that's another flight if it's not online. That's another hotel stay. That's another X amount of dollars that your organization or you out of your pocket is paying for. Also, you can get to the point where you go get the certification, and then you go to do the certification, and it's open book. Which is why so many people get the certification, because they don't really know. They just know how to go through the PDFs and find the answer to the questions. So it's not really yielding the skill that people think it's yielding, which is another reason why a lot of jobs, there was a day that people say, oh, you have NNG certification. Great. Let's talk to this person. Not anymore. They're a dime a dozen now. I think that the Human Factors International certification is better. It's more respected. It's the only one that I've ever seen on a job application anywhere. And so, and if you already have the skill, you can test out. You pay $700, you test out, but you're not paying $7,000, $7,000 to $10,000, which is what you have to do if you go through NNG. So I'm not saying that the courses are bad. I'm saying that the certification process, it needs to be revisited, and getting that certification is not likely to benefit you. Just so you know. Again, I've been doing this 27 years. I got my first NNG certification somewhere around 2012, 2013 or so. I got nothing to show for it. I became a UX certified manager, I think about 2018. It didn't help me get a manager job. It really didn't. So, and I already knew the stuff. So I was taking the courses because it was required. I wish I had done, looking back, I wish I had done HFI. So that's my take on that.
Mr. Hood, thank you so much. Thank you again. I mean, you have a wealth of information, and we could sit here all day just listening at what you got to say. So I really appreciate your time and you sharing what you have. Guys, if we can give him a round of applause in our chat, that's great. Let me just finish off by saying thank you to everyone. I wanted to say thank you to our sponsors, our speakers, whoever's logged in from all over the world. I know we had Dr. Hines from Jamaica who was on this morning. We have Lanray, which is she's from Canada on there as well, guys from the US and people in Europe. Guys, thank you so much. And I really appreciate your time and effort. And look out for our mail that's going to be coming out, because we're going to be editing some videos, and you'll be able to see Darren's talk on our YouTube channel, as well as Darren, are you allowed to share your slides with us?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'll send you a PDF once we're done, or send you a link to it. I'll probably put it on Dropbox and send you the link. So absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks everyone, and have a lovely day, and we'll speak to everybody soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.